All right, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the introduction. And yes, I am the Senior Procurement Analyst at GSA, or one of them. There's not just one. But I think mine has more to do with my age than maybe my expertise. I'm not too sure. All right, but let me say this. I haven't always been with GSA. I have for the last 15 years, but I did spend nearly 19 years in DOD as a Navy contracting officer and a professor of contracting at the DAU. And so I've been around this block quite a bit, and actually starting in government and contracting prior to the FAR coming into existence. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of changes over the course of the years, and there have been major changes to acquisition policies and procedures, and that have had impact on the way we in government do business and how industry does business with us. And so schedules have come a long way. And if we're talking about a comparison of schedules, meaning the processes that's found in 8.4 of the FAR versus FAR Part 15, we're talking really about a large dollar procurement, one over the simplified acquisition threshold of $150,000. And we're talking about buying it off an already established IDIQ vehicle that GSA has put in place for you, versus creating a new contract vehicle that you would do off of a FAR 15 solicitation or an RFP, request for a proposal. So what I want to do today is, if you were with me yesterday in either of my two sessions, I gave a short overview of schedules to make sure that you understood the vehicle that we're talking about regarding 8.4. And then we'll cruise right into a comparison. But although the title of the presentation is 8.4 versus 15, that's going to be the predominance of the comparison. But I do also want to slip a little 13 in on you, and so we can talk about that as well, okay? Because you know what? When you think about methodologies of procurement, I made this statement before. We think about 12 is for commercial application. We think 13 for simplified acquisition, 14 for sealed bidding, and 15 for commercial or non-commercial, large dollar above the 150 threshold negotiated type procurements. But we seldom say 8.4 is a methodology. And I'm not sure that technically the legal folks would say that it's a methodology, but to me it is. If you're using a part of FAR to describe how to acquire, how to buy, how to procure, then you're looking at a method of procurement. Of course, in this instance, we're talking about against an already established IDIQ contract. So let's talk about it. These courses are, this particular topic is up in a little more detail than we're getting today on the DAU portal. And so if you have access to that portal as a government employee, you can take that course for 2 CLPs if you're so inclined. It is endorsed by the Federal Acquisition Institute and DAU. And so our goal today is to kind of give that mini overview of the MES program, if you will, comparing 8.4 to 15 with a little 13 slipped in. All right, and then we'll talk about procedures and so forth between the two, and talk about restrictions as well. Because in the world of one versus another, we really do have some restrictions that would make it almost mandatory for you to use the opposite vehicle just because you can't make it work for you. All right, and so in talking about this, what is a multiple award schedule? I think I hit the slide clicker a couple of times. It is for commercial products and services and solutions. And so, gosh, Tommy, yeah, I know what a product is or a supply type item versus a service. We talk about task and delivery order contracting, and we just really differentiate between task and delivery order contracting as to whether we're buying a supply type item versus ordering a task or a service to be done. But what's that solution thing? Well, if you were with me yesterday, we talked about something called contractor team arrangements in the GSA schedule arena. And of course, you can physically have an order that would include a vendor from various schedules because one schedule would not meet your need. And so in other words, if your market research actually says, hey, schedules is a viable methodology for me, but to get what I need a vendor off of Schedule A, one off of B, and one off of C to make this work, that is a possibility. Because if you can separate those, the level of effort that the vendors are going to give, you could probably do it through that contractor team arrangement. All right, we talk about schedules being referred to as the GSA Multiple Award Schedules Program. We in GSA refer to the MAS program, as in the acronym MAS, meaning Multiple Award Schedules. I refer to the program as schedules, and every time I'm sending an email or talking about it in a written text, I will clearly use a capital S, because schedules to me represents the program in and of itself. The FAR then will speak to the schedules program, but it will also talk about the federal supply schedules program. So look, we're not talking about multiple programs, we're just talking about one. All right, and so that one is managed by GSA, and we do that in conjunction with the VA. All right, and so we're talking about standing solicitation and FedBiz Ops for the vendors to come in. In other words, if you're using it, if you're a government person and you're using the schedules program for your agency to meet a requirement, you're not going to use FedBiz Ops. You never, on the pre-award side of a schedules buy, use FedBiz Ops as an announcement tool. All right, it's not an option. You don't do it. Now, what's a little different, to be quite frank with you, is that there is one exception to that rule. And that one exception has to do is if you're using schedules sole source, legitimate sole source. And there's a vehicle called an LSJ, a limited source justification for the schedules to use for sole source and brand name. But if you're doing the sole source deal through the schedules buy, you would be required, or you will be required, to post a notice after the buy in FedBiz Ops. Within 14 days of the buy, you have to post a notice in FedBiz Ops that you did the buy sole source, and you have to post the LSJ information in that notice, and it has to be in FedBiz Ops for 30 days. That's the only instance ever that you would have use of FedBiz Ops if your decision is that I'm going to meet my requirement through schedules. Now, we at GSA, our contracting officers award these scheduled vehicles using the procedures at FAR Part 12. Your knowledge of FAR, understanding that 12 is a methodology for commercial procurement, large dollar commercial procurement. So it's only practical that when we award those IDIQs at the contract level, that we award them using FAR Part 12. Now, we do award them at the contract level, and physically speaking, GSA actually owns these vehicles. They are our contracts. We manage them. We administer them. You know, we have oversight for them. But you, as a user, if you're a federal agency, you use them at what we refer to as the customer or the user level. And so you have access to them as if they were your own. You know, in fact, we encourage you to be just self-riding in regards to the use of these vehicles. And we don't want to be in your business. All right, to be quite frank with you, we got enough business of our own. All right, and so but we are there to help. In fact, there's a network of people referred to as customer service directors. Joe, who introduced me, is a customer service director here in the Huntsville area. But there's a network. If you work in an acquisition office, if you have authority to obligate government dollars, there's a GSA customer service director assigned to you. And if you don't know who that is, you need to learn them, because the services that GSA provides in support of your office with people like Joe is at no cost to your agency. And so physically speaking, they help you with market research. They do training on GSA e-tools. They're available for you to answer questions. And if they can't answer it, they know who to come to. All right, and so they would come to people like me in the Office of Acquisition Management. You know, physically speaking, I spent 17 months as the chief of MAS policy. And so they know the source, and so you need to be knowledgeable of your CSD. And so 8.4 of the FAR deals with the processes. I think everybody was given, or you had the opportunity to get a desk reference when you came in the room today. This is a book that is set up for the guidance of 8.4. Now, here's the truth about this particular version, version 6. It's out of date. And right now, okay, I'm sorry, we're the government. All right, but right now, version 7 is in review. And my anticipation is that we're going to go to print within 30 days. And of course, that could mean that we would not be available for hard copy until probably in the 60-day mark. But the truth be known is that we always have online the most current copy. So version 7 is forthcoming. And so if you desire, to have a hard copy of version 7, you can get it through CMLS, which is in the world of GSA, which is our printing folks out of Chicago. And this is something that your customer service director can get for you, for sure. FAR Part 12, we already know that's how GSA awards at the contract level. 6.102, Delta 3. FAR Part 6 deals with competition, all right? And so in this particular site, in FAR Part 6, it clearly defines that schedules is a competitive procedure. So if anyone ever has an issue or thinks that schedules doesn't comply with the Competition and Contracting Act, that being CECA, this kind of dispels that, if you will. Other parts of FAR that we're very familiar with, 13, 14, 15 and 19 and 36. These are parts of FAR that you deal with on a regular basis, but they don't have anything to do with schedules. Now, there is a little exception to that. When we talk about 13, we say the exception is MAS BPAs. One of the topics I gave yesterday was scheduled BPAs. And physically speaking, you can do an open market BPA, but you are limited to simplified acquisition dollars. But if you wanted to use schedule holders only as your BPA recipients, whether it be a single award BPA or whether it be a multiple award BPA, you have the capability of doing that. Now, the exception to 13 is because you use the format that's in 13 for BPA setup, even though it's going to be a scheduled BPA. Now, that's the only place in FAR that it talks about the setup of BPAs, all right? And so that's why we're utilizing that part as the setup methodology. But I will also say to you that when it comes to your scheduled BPA is that there's no limitations on the funds. All right, so under an open market, you're limited to 13 funds, $150,000 on your BPA. In the world of schedules, the sky's the limit, more or less. We have agencies that utilize hundreds of BPA holders for services such as professional engineering that spend billions, yes, with a B, billions of dollars in an annual period. All right, and so, they're utilizing this to the maximum extent that is practical for them. All right, FAR Part 14 deals with sealed bidding, has nothing to do with schedules. 15, we say, has nothing to do with schedules, but let's just talk about that for a moment. In the world of 14 is awarded on low price, technically acceptable. 15 is awarded on the case of best value. Well, schedules are awarded on best value. So at the user level, as your agency uses the vehicles, you're going to make a best value determination. All right? But since schedules are for commercial, it is probably a very true statement that in the world of commercial salient characteristics, manufacturer to manufacturer, that if we're talking about a commercial buy for product especially, we can say that low price technically acceptable probably is going to win out more than some other type of element. But in the world of schedules, you can use best value and you can have other factors of consideration, not just price factors, but other factors, non-price factors as well. All right, 19 deals with small business. This afternoon, I'm teaching a session on schedules and small business set-asides, which has only been allowed since November of 2011. And it has made some major impact in the world, the way some agencies were doing set-asides for commercial services that actually started under the old programs that came about in the late 80s and early 90s. And so they ended up with set-asides with commercial vendors with small businesses. And now they could not use schedules for their recompetes because they couldn't be guaranteed to get a small business. Now in the world of schedules, you can. And so we can talk about that later this afternoon. But it says 19 doesn't apply. Well, Tommy, you just said you could do a small business set-aside. Why wouldn't 19 apply? The fact is that the procedures of 19 in doing set-asides is not applicable to schedules. And in 19, it says if your set-aside is going to be off of a GSA schedule, use the procedures in 8.405. All right, and so 19 directs you back to 8.405 for set-asides if that's what your goal is. Now, there is an exception. It says bundling, all right? So you know what bundling is by definition, taking a number of smaller procurements, putting them together to have a larger one. So that concept is applicable in the world of schedules as well. All right, also I would share with you that the size standards that are found in 19 would be applicable to schedules if you're going to do a set aside, and also the definitions of the socioeconomic categories, but not the procedures of 19, all right? And so when we talk about 36, that's for construction and architectural and engineering services. There is no construction or architectural or engineering services standalone in the schedules program. So 36 is not applicable to the schedules program because of that reason. Now somebody here has said, look, I mean, I had an ancillary service that was construction by nature and I was able to get it. And an example of that would be where an agency bought some major sized generators to be backup electrical power for buildings and so forth. And so they bought them off of schedules, and we're talking about a major buy, all right? And literally speaking though, these generators are of a magnitude that they need a concrete pad. And I read the spec on a few of them, and some of them require concrete pad with a 36-inch deep footer, all right? We're talking major pad here, all right? But that's construction by nature. But because it was ancillary to the requirement, the generators were the requirement, they were able to get that construction off of Schedule 56 to be done ancillary because it needed to be done because it was, and it could be done through the schedules program as a part of the order, but not the main purpose of the order, if you will. All right, and so Part 7, Part 10, you know, in the world of government contracting, we physically, you know, we're going to always do those things. We're going to have an acquisition plan. In the world of schedules, the more money you spend, the more complex your requirement, the more complex your acquisition plan will be. Same is true in the world of FAR Part 13 and 15. 13 acquisition plans are pretty minor. But when you get to 15 and you're above the simplified acquisition threshold of $150,000, we become a little more complex and complete, if you will, within the descriptions that we have in our acquisition plan. The market research that we do will kind of roll our acquisition plan in a particular direction. I always say that market research is that function that's going to make a decision for you of whether schedules is even viable. You know, in the world of government, we spend $530 billion, give or take, on an annual basis in the open market. About $250 billion of that is bought through IDIQ type contracts. And so schedules is, depending on the stats that you read, it was at one point a $50 billion program. Spending is down in government. The war effort is not as major as it has been in the last 10 years or so. And so we're somewhere in the 40 billion, give or take, arena now on an annual basis through schedules. So what I'm saying is that of all of government, all IDIQ type contracting, schedules is about 20% of it. And so it is a major role, you know, in the world we do business. 17.5 deals with interagency acquisitions. And in 17.5, it says that if you are going to do a procurement utilizing another agency's contract vehicle, and it's above $500,000, $500,000, then you need to document your contract file accordingly. You know, and so you can write that as, I've heard people call it a mini business case. I've heard people refer to it as a DNF, a determination and findings. It's not a complex document to write, really a number of sentences that just describes your situation and that your market research has shown that schedules is the viable way to go. Protest, 33.1. Yes, unfortunately, schedules can be protested. But, you know, coming out of a policy shop, I will tell you that we look at a lot of statistics, and the statistics of the volume of protest against the volume of FAR 15 buys is a higher percentage than the volume of protest against the volume of schedule buys. And so we have our protest, we do. And agencies, the biggest protest issue that agency sees is where the agency at the user level actually mixes their methodologies. They'll mix processes from FAR 15 to a FAR 8.4 buy, and so the contractors do become a little bit confused in that regard. And so, you know, is it a 15, is it a 8.4? Really, they should ask that question, you know, before they make that presumption, I would say. But the deal is that that's the biggest cause of protest that we see. Second cause is scope issues, whether the requirement is really within scope of the schedules. And then there's what we refer to as other direct cost or open market items predominantly being an issue when it comes to protest. 37.6 deals with performance-based contracting. You know what that is. As opposed to your statement of work being pretty standard, we're talking about a performance statement of work, where we, the government, tell this is what the end result is that we desire to see. And so we want you, Mr. or Ms. Contractor, to give us a technical approach on how you will solve our problem and make it go away. All right, so in the world of 15, we would say the contractor is going to give us a technical proposal. But to keep things in terminology so we understand where we are in the FAR, I would say that under an 8.4, we call it a technical approach. What's the difference, Tommy? There is no difference. You know, the contractor's responding to the performance-based statement of work that we've issued. They're giving us their way. They're going to meet our need at this point. We're just using terminology to keep it within the wheelhouse of the part of FAR that we're functioning in. 39 deals with, or FAR 39 deals with the acquisition of information technology. Schedule 70, which is IT, product and service, physically and associated functions, has over 5,000 vendors. It has more vendors than any other schedule that we have. And so there is a lot of IT being bought off schedule. GSA also is one of 4 agencies that offer a GWAC. All right, Army offers one, NIH has one, and NASA has one. And along with GSA, any agency can use any of those other agencies' GWAC vehicle. All right, and so since GSA has one, we're embedded in IT there. There's another method in GSA referred to as global supply, which is a warehousing program that it kind of mirrors the DLA program, where DLA buys military-specific items and has them available for the military units, and physically those units can requisition from DLA for those items that they need, and the requisition doesn't constitute a contract action. And so in GSA, we have what we call global supply, where we have commercial items available for you to requisition from us through the catalog. The catalog's online. It's also still printed in hard copy if you desire that. But the deal is that you can requisition, and the point here is that there is IT product available in that, along with many other items as well. So in GSA, in the Federal Acquisition Service, schedules is not the only thing that we actually do as far as contract vehicles to support other agencies. All right, so let's quickly, since we're primarily talking about 8.4 versus 15, let's quickly do kind of a comparison of if this was an 8.4 buy above $150,000 versus one under 15. With 15, very process-oriented, you're going to have a SSEB, Source Selection Evaluation Board. And it's going to have a source selection authority, an SSA. There's going to be physically, there's going to be technical, there's going to be contracting, there's going to be financial, there's going to be legal, there's going to be a number of folks that are represented on that board. They meet a number of times. They're going to look at the statement of work. They've got function to do in the processes. In the world of schedules, there's nothing in FAR that says you can't use an SSEB, but Tommy doesn't know why you would want to. If there's not a necessity to do one, and I'm buying commercial anyway, why would I go to that extra step to prolong the procurement if I can get away with not doing it? All right, you issue the solicitation for 30 days. Oh, why? Because unless you're taking exception to SECA, that's the rule. So under a FAR 15 buy, physically your RFP must be public 30 days. And there's another bullet down here that reemphasizes something I said earlier about synopsizing the requirement in FedBizOps. FAR Part 5 deals with synopsis, and if you're above 25,000, unless you're taking an exception to synopsis, you're going to have to synopsize prior to issuing that RFP for 30 days. So we're talking about a 2-week synopsis period, a 30-day solicitation time. We're looking at about 6 weeks or 45 days, give or take, to be able to make this be a point in the acquisition processes where you would have your proposals ready to evaluate. That same procurement, if it's commercial by nature, no synopsis, and you could issue your RFQ using GSA eBuy as a methodology, an electronic RFQ tool, for as short as 48 hours. 48 hours. There's a lot of that at year end. Are you with me? All right. But when it comes down to it, the average length of time that RFQs are posted for GSA vendors to respond is somewhere between 10 and 15 days. All right. And so think about that, a 15-day solicitation. It is truly possible that you could have that procurement wrapped up and awarded before the 45-day point where you would be getting the opportunity to open those proposals and look at them. All right, it happens on a regular basis. All right, and frequently we support, and our CSD community supports vendors and the contracting community of government in those processes and how to do that, if you will. All right, and so when we talk about conducting a competition by seeking contractors outside, your market research is going to definitize whether what you need to buy is commercial by nature or not. If it is commercial by nature, then GSA Schedules may be a possibility. I'm not foolish enough to stand here and try to tell you that for every commercial purchase that you've got, that Schedules is the tool. I'm going to tell you that it's a good chance. And that's when you need to look to see, once you've made the determination that it is commercial, what you're buying, whether Schedules can even offer it, and take a look and see. All right, and so when we talk about making certain that we're in the right part of FAR, there's terms that we use. We talk about discussions. In FAR Part 15, there's an explanation of the difference between discussions and clarifications. All right, are you with me? All right, and so when we speak about that, we don't talk discussions in Schedules, but we have open communication with our vendors. You have a capability of talking with them during the solicitation period so that you and they, have an understanding in what it is the government needs and how it's going to work. But there are some terminologies that are pertinent to 15, that being debriefings, whether they be pre or post award. And then there's the aspect of a competitive range, which is also relevant, if you will, to the concept of debriefs. So unsuccessful contractors in a FAR 15 buy have the opportunity to seek a debrief, meaning that you can talk to the contracting professionals in on the government side and find out where your shortcomings were and that sort of thing. If they have set a competitive range and you're not in it, contractors, then you have the opportunity for the pre-award debrief. If you're in the competitive range, but you weren't the one that was selected for award, then you get an opportunity for a post-award debrief. There are timelines that are involved, and obviously the vendors, you must adhere to those timelines. But these debriefs and the competitive range structure is formal in the world of FAR Part 15. And so in the world of Schedules, we don't call what we give back to the vendors who are unsuccessful a debrief. We call it feedback, all right? And so I made a comment yesterday and I said that feedback and debriefs really is the same information, because what the feedback that the government would give to the vendor would be an analysis of their quote to the requirement at hand. Literally looking at the evaluation factors that had been established for award. All right, a government person is never going to compare this inquiry by an unsuccessful vendor to the winning vendor. We're not going to compare it to other unsuccessfuls. We're only going to use that unsuccessful quote to the evaluation factors. But the point is that when we talk about our feedback is less formal. A contracting officer in government can give feedback on a GSA buy to an unsuccessful over the telephone. All right, we can do that. We just document our contract file as to what the talk was all about, if you will. And so we don't do competitive range, but let's talk about that for a moment. In a FAR Part 15 buy, physically speaking, what we're doing is that we issue the RFQ to a number of folks, 10, 12, 15, based on the market research that we did. Hopefully we got 10, 12, or 15 proposals back in. And so we're required to look at every proposal that we get under the FAR 15 rules. So we look at them and then we narrow it down. And we say these 3, these 4, maybe even these 5 have the most reasonable expectation of winning the award. So then the others are set aside. They get notice that they have not met our competitive range of the 3, 4, or 5 that we're talking about. All right, and so then we end up making a selection and we go forward. But in the world of Schedules, we do the same thing. You issue the RFQ to 10, 12, or 15. You get 10, 12, or 15 quotes back in. We look at them all because we're required to, and then we set these 3, these 4, these 5 as having the most reasonable expectation of winning the award. All right? What did we do? We call it a down select. Now, it's just terminology, but you know, when we talk about processes in 15 versus 8.4, we want to separate the processes to eliminate the possibility of a protest. So it is very similar. You'll be challenged to find the difference in the processes. As we talk about, we just refer to them as a different term. All right, and so mentioned it before that you're either in the program or not. Based on your market research, if you find that Schedules is viable and you're going to issue an RFQ, you're not going to also issue an RFP and include the commercial side. You're either on the commercial side in regards to a FAR 15 buy or you're in 8.4. All right, and then we've said this a number of times, there's no SYNOPSIS in FedBizOps, with the only exception being that if you have a limited source justification for a sole source buy in Schedules, you do that post-award notice in FedBizOps. And that is all expressed in 8.405G. But there is in FAR Part 5. FAR Part 5 has exceptions to SYNOPSIS. And number 11, under the exception site in 5, it actually says that you don't synopsize requirements that were previously synopsized as a contract action. And so think about it. GSA at the contract level has those solicitations that are standing in FedBizOps. They run continually. Contractors can come in to this program at any time. You're at the user level. Your RFQ is to issue a task or a delivery order against this already established contract vehicle. So it's clear within the FAR that that's true. Ordering procedures under schedule are pretty straightforward depending upon what you're buying. If you're buying a supply type item or a service that doesn't require a statement of work, the rules are here, 8.405-1. And we speak about, if you will, below micro being $3,500, you just pick a vendor and make the award. It says to distribute, and that is meant to mean that physically if you have multiple requirements that are under that particular schedule, you don't want to just set yourself with the same vendor repeatedly, because you do want to give fair opportunity to those other vendors on there. You don't want to have an appearance of any impropriety or relationship with any particular vendor. Micro, above 35, but under Simplified Acquisition, survey at least 3 contractors documenting your contract file. That survey can be by telephone, or it could be through an email campaign. It could be a number of methodologies, if you will. The LSJ, if it's applicable, and you determine if a price reduction should be sought. Not mandated under Simplified Acquisition, but above $150K, you are mandated to ask for a price reduction. All right, and so when we talk about that, that's pretty important. Make a best value determination. Above 150, you develop an RFQ, you're going to issue it to a minimum of 3. The goal is to get 3 quotes. Now, there's a major slide in this presentation that talks about the aspect of fair notice in the world of schedules. And so there needs to be fair notice given to those scheduled vendors that are on that particular schedule and possibly that particular SIN, special item number, under that schedule. And so e-buy has been determined, and it is stated in the FAR that if you use e-buy as your solicitation tool, you post your RFQ on that tool. And let's say, for example, that under this particular schedule and special item number, there's 300 vendors. And your market research gave you 10 or 12 or 15, and you went ahead and sent the RFQ to those. It is true that the rest of those vendors under that particular special item number can see it. They can see it if they look. And so I have government people telling me all the time, I'm not going to use e-buy because I'm afraid if I do that I'm going to have so many quotes that it's just going to make, this is going to be a very laborious processes in making this GSA buy. But the truth is that it doesn't happen. Physically speaking, you don't get, but about the average number is 3.3 quotes from an e-buy notification. I'm the core on a support contract right now. And when we looked at the vendors that were under the 2 SINs under the MOBA schedule, there were 1,326. Now, I know there's 1,326 because we divided it between 3 people and we looked at every single one of them. And then we came with a short list of 15. And I said to the contracting officer, issue the RFQ to these 15. And she came back to me the next day and she said, Tommy, I got your RFQ posted. I said, great. She goes, I made a mistake. I said, what was that? She said, I checked the all box. So the RFQ went to all 1,315, and suddenly my heart sank, and I thought, I'm going to have so many quotes I'm going to have to evaluate. Do you know how many we got? 10. But the 10 were in the 15 based on the market research. So 5 that I had researched and thought would be good fit didn't even respond. All right? And of the 1,326, we only heard from 120 odd vendors. Most of them sent a notice that said, we're not interested, thanks for considering. The rest didn't respond at all. And I thought to myself, now I'm mad. You know, why, we sent you an RFQ and you didn't even respond, you know? If, there's an element here to the vendor community that you're in the program, and if the government has a requirement and we send you an RFQ, we're looking for you to give us some feedback, all right, and so forth. But anyway, but of the 10, they were in my original 15. We ended up doing a down select to 6, and then we ended up making an award. It worked out really, really perfectly, if you will. It was one of those types of requirements that you hope is reviewed by a PMR team or the IG, all right, because all our due diligence was there. All right, and so you would seek a price reduction because you're over 150. You can't place these orders orally, and you're going to make a best value determination for the award. Now, 8.405-2 speaks about ordering procedures if you have a service that has a statement of work, and the preferred statement of work type is performance-based. Below micro, same rule, just pick a vendor and award. Micro to simplified acquisition, create a statement of work with evaluation criteria. You're looking to survey or issue the RFQ to a minimum of 3 vendors. The goal is to get 3 quotes. LSJ, if it's applicable, distribute it, make a best value determination. But if you're above 150, again, the RFQ has to be issued with evaluation criteria, and the e-buy rule is the same. And so if you fail to get 3 quotes and you use GSA e-buy, but you got 1 or you got 2, and from those 2 you could actually make an award, you have the capability of doing so. Because if I didn't explain this previously on the slide that we just left, what the FAR is indicating clearly is that e-buy meets fair notice because those vendors, all 300 of them that we were just talking about, can see it. All right, and so since they can see it, they have the capability, then fair notice has been met, and so you can go ahead and make the award. Now, I'll take a stop here and say there are some agencies that have a little more stringent guidance on that and say that, look, FAR may say that, but we want 3 quotes in our contract file above $150,000. And so GSA doesn't get into your agency's specifics when it comes to adding a little bit to the rules and making it a little more stringent. In the rule of agencies supplementing FAR guidance, think about your agency supplement to the FAR. Physically speaking, the agency can be more stringent, but they can't take away from the impact that the FAR has, or the intention of the FAR, if you will. So LSJ, if it's applicable, seek a price reduction, best value determination. But your overall price reasonableness has to do with the level of effort and the category of labors that you have. And so when you're using services that have different categories of labor, and let's say that there are 4 categories and you've got pricing based on an hourly rate for each of those 4 categories, you need to look at what the contractors are quoting in regards to how much labor are they physically going to do in each category, and compare that to the independent government estimate. And you also will compare it to the other quotes to see that everybody is seeing this requirement from the same point of view. All right, so we know that there's over 40 million, there's 39 schedules, 9 of them are actually owned by the VA or managed by the VA in the program. Mr. Sharp made a quote this morning and said there's over 18,000 vendors. The number is down from that a little bit. In that regard, 80% he did say is small business, and that is true. BPAs and orders or task or delivery orders can be set aside for small business. But right now we're quoting for slide purposes a $40+ billion annual program. All right, all sorts of services that are available. You can see that this is a number of them. A more complete list can be located on another GSA tool, which is GSA Library, which is the search engine of all search engines for schedules. And then these are just some categories, if you will, of the supply type items that are available. But each one of these categories represents an acquisition center where GSA contracting people are doing the awarding. So for example, we talk about furniture is bought all out of Philadelphia, so they buy furniture for the government. Or they put furniture manufacturers and resellers on GSA schedule. But they have a technical department there that is furniture engineers that really look at the furniture that's being offered to the government to get on schedule so that it meets the government's needs. So let's talk about it. We know what schedules are. We've been talking about it for 30 minutes. But when we talk about FAR Part 13, it's open market procurement to the simplified acquisition threshold. It's broken out into micro, and then from micro to that threshold of $150,000. And then above 150, we would move into a negotiated type of a procurement if FAR Part 14 is not a methodology that we would use. And so we're above simplified acquisition if we're in FAR 15, but FAR 15 could be for commercial or it could be for non-commercial. And so when we speak about that aspect of FAR 8.4, you know what it is. I've given you a good description of it today. There's contracts there. We have delivery versus task orders, delivery for product, task for services. There's ordering procedures there. You can have the BPAs and how to establish them, and you can also do a limited source justification. So to reiterate something I may have said earlier in this presentation, you can do an LSJ. If you were to want to limit sources in a schedules buy and you're DOD and I said J and A to you, you know that that's a justification and approval. If you're a civilian agency, the same document is more commonly referred to as a JOFOC, a justification for other than full and open competition. See, the civilian agencies use all the letters. DOD has just shortened the whole thing. But when we're speaking about it, it's the document that's found in FAR Part 6 for taking an exception to SECA. There's 7 exceptions to SECA. If you're writing a JOFOC or a J&A, you're taking an exception to SECA. Of the 7 exceptions, 5 of them require that document for an open market buy. But in the world of schedules, we don't do that. In the world of schedules, you can take exception and do sole source and brand name, but you do an LSJ as defined by 8.406. All right, not enough time to go into all of that LSJ stuff. The fair opportunity aspect that we spoke about with GSA eBuy is also directly out of the FAR. And so it speaks about the concept of the fair opportunity. You would RFQ posted to eBuy as opposed to as many scheduled contractors as practical. And so if you post to eBuy, physically speaking, every vendor under that particular schedule and SIN can see your RFQ. All right, and so when we talk about 15 is a negotiated procurement. In my Navy days, I'll be quite upfront with you that 15 is all I used. 15 is all I used. But I was in an industrial environment. I was supporting the repair of ships and submarines, and I was on a nuclear team. So we were buying support services and materials to do support for Navy weapon systems and also for propulsion plants. All right, so not much of that available through the schedules program. So it was all specialty, non-commercial, if you will, through FAR Part 15. So we issue under 15, we issue the RFP, the request for proposal, which is different than under 13 or under schedules 8.4, where we issue an RFQ. In the world of government, a proposal is an offer that the government can accept without any further discussion with the submitter of that, and that we can accept it with the stroke of a pen by a warranted contracting officer. All right, but under the rules of FAR, whether you're under 13 or whether you're under 8.4, a quote is not an offer. It's not considered an offer. It's physically considered information. And so what has to happen is that the user agency has to create another document, and we have to create a document, most likely a purchase order or something similar, where we go back to the vendor who gave us their quote, who gave us information that we evaluated, and now we want to have this relationship with them with this task or delivery order. All right, and so proper terminology puts you in an arena. I can share about FAR Part 14. You issue an IFB, an invitation for bid. And in Tommy's point of view, the bid is the most misused word in the world of government, because we say I've got to make my bids today. I've got to review the bids. The bids are due on Friday, blah, blah, blah. But if you talk to me and you say bids, I want to have a game of 20 questions with you, because I want to know, are we talking about the processes of 14 and an IFB? Or are we really talking about an RFP or an RFQ, and you're just calling the proposal or the quote a bid? All right, and so there is an element here of connotation in the terms that we actually speak about. All right, so there's rules for soliciting and all of that, and the cost versus technical trade-offs, pricing rules that are defined. I would say to you that GSA schedules have pricing that are based on what-ifs. So vendors who price, they have got every what-if tied in there. But when you, at the user level, customize your RFQ, you're physically going to end up, if you will, with a package that is going to be discounted off of that scheduled price. Vendors can never raise their price, but they can always discount. All right, some comparison, if you will, between 8.4 and 13 and 15. You know, we know the dollar thresholds already, significant number and quantity of sources already there. You're going to have to find your sources under 13 and 15. The terms and conditions at the contract level are available to you under 8.4. You can add terms and conditions at the schedule order level, but you can't add a term or conditions that will conflict with those we have at the contract level. Under FAR Part 13, if you're above micro, 3,500, but under 150, that is a total small business set aside for businesses. All right, total small business set aside in that dollar range for government. Now, the deal is that if you're under a schedule buy and you're above micro, but you're under 150, that does not apply. And so you could, in that dollar range, actually buy from an other than small. Under FAR Part 15, you can do cost type contracting. And truthful known, there is no cost type contracting in the schedule world. All right, and so there is an element there of a larger variation of contract types in the world of FAR Part 15. Listen, FAR Part 7 deals with acquisition planning. We've already mentioned the fact that your plan is going to be commensurate with the complexity of your requirement and also the dollar value of your requirement, so we'll leave that there. When we speak about a comparison of procedures, can you use low price technically acceptable or trade-off? You can do that in any of the three. Pre-competed schedule contracts, fair and reasonable pricing, that is available under 8.4. Your agency may have some BPAs or some IDIQs that are available to you for your requirement under the other methodologies. Fair opportunity, we've really hit that already. We've already talked a little bit about the LSJ as well. It is here that is applicable under 8.4, but under 13 and 15, you would have to utilize whatever is appropriate through FAR Part 6 on competition. And then under the 15, that's where the JOFOC or the JNA would come in if you're taking an exception to SECA. All right, commercial items and products and services, that's all schedules are. That is the deal under 13 with some addition for some construction projects above $2,000. And then, of course, under 15, you can do commercial and non-commercial. We're talking about a solicitation. We've already spoke about those. RFQs under schedules and under FAR 13, RFPs under 15. May require consideration of factors other than price. Yes, you can use non-price factors in a schedule buy as you would in a FAR 15 buy. But under a 13 buy, you know, you're utilizing factors other than price, but typically it's going to be a low price technically acceptable. Prepare a source selection plan. You can do it under schedules, but it's not required. It may be used under FAR 13, but it is required under 15. So evaluation criteria, true for all three. Best value determination, true for all three. And when we talk about sources or how we solicit sources, the goal under schedules above simplified acquisition is to get 3 quotes. That's the goal for your competition. Under micro, you don't even have to do that. You can just select a vendor. And, but the goal is to get 3. Now, under 13, the contracting officer must promote competition and attempt to solicit at least 3. And then you're synopsizing in for a FAR 15 buy in FedBizOps with a goal to have competition, adequate competition. All right, and so when we speak about consistent with the solicitation, you better evaluate consistent with your solicitation no matter what method, or you could be opening yourself for a protest. Small business set-asides, discretionary under schedules, mandated above micro, under 150 under the rules of 13, and then what we have is the rule of 2 under under FAR Part 15. So if 2 or more vendors happen to be small that are in your market research, then it would most likely be recommended for a small business set-aside. Technical evaluation, yeah, you can use LPTA or trade-off in all 3 methodologies. Evaluation is source selection documentation. Your contract file tells a story. You need to write it in such a fashion that someone else can pick it up later and have an understanding about what you're doing, what you've done, where you're going, and so forth, and why. Ensure a vendor's quote complies with all special terms and conditions. Obviously, you're going to do that in all regards. But in the world of schedules, you have the capability of seeing the terms and conditions that GSA has with the vendor at the contract level. So physically, you can see the terms and conditions and include them in your contract file if you so desire, and to know exactly where our relationship is with them. We're going to treat everybody fairly. Debriefings are available in under 13 and 15. We call it feedback under schedules. All right, and so monitoring the performance, oh yeah, you can have a core. If you've got if it's financially responsible, you wouldn't want to have a core normally under a 13 buy because the dollars are so small. But if you're under 15 or if you have a large dollar 8.4 buy, you can have a contracting officer's representative monitor the work that's being done. Delivery and invoicing and the Prompt Payment Act and order closeout, that is the same under no matter what methodology you use. So some major differences between 8.4 and 15 has to do with this aspect of publicizing. No publicizing under 8.4, but if you're above $25,000, and of course if you're in 15, you're above 150, you're going to have to publicize unless you take an exception that is allowed in FAR Part 5. All right, and so you would normally, unless you take exception, you're going to put that post in FedBizOps. But in GSA, you can use eBuy, which would disseminate the information or the RFQ around. So you document your file. In 15, one of the requirements is that you have a small business subcontracting plan submitted as a part of the proposal package from vendors who are other than small. In the world of schedules, if the vendor is not small, at the contract level, GSA has already got the subcontracting plan in the package that you have available to you. So reps and certs that we understand is Section K in a uniform contract format. All of that documentation is already in the schedule contract. And then there is the determination of responsibility under FAR Part 9 rules that you would have to do under a FAR Part 15, but in schedules, it's already been done for you in that regard. All right, and so when we speak about just key points between the two, we're talking about an RFQ versus an RFP. We're talking about clarifications and communications with schedule contractors and not calling it discussions. We talk about evaluations, if you will, and so forth, but we have an element of negotiation of cost and price under 15. And in the world of schedules, we look at that as we evaluate and we look for a reduction of price. We seek a reduction, mandated to seek one if we're above 150. 19 doesn't apply for small business set-asides under schedules, 8.405 does. 19 and the rule of 2 is applicable under 15. So you can consider agency socioeconomic status. Talk about that this afternoon in the small business presentation. You can use small business size and status as an evaluation factor in schedule awards. All right. So if subcontracting plan is required, they're going to be at the contract level. All right, and so when we speak about a few more contractor teaming arrangements, not in accordance with FAR 9.6. If you were with me yesterday, you know what I'm talking about. So 9.6 under 15 allows for joint ventures where a number of businesses maybe come together and create a new entity to do business as one in a 15 buy, not the same under schedules. So simplified acquisition evaluation, where formal SSCB under 15 task or delivery order as opposed to a contract action being awarded under a 15. Terms and conditions at the contract level for the schedule, terms and conditions in your FAR 15 solicitation become a part of the contract. And so we do feedbacks versus debriefs. All right, saving time. That's the biggest thing I can share with you today, that you have a large dollar procurement, you will save much time using a schedule if you're buying something commercial. So it streamlines the processes, it's flexible purchase item with orders and BPAs and contractor team arrangements. And then your agency will get the social economic credit. Because 80% of our vendors are small of some socioeconomic category, you will get that. Now, there's 3 e-tools. GSA Advantage, an online buying tool where government people use their credit card. I'm not going to explain that to you here. GSA eBuy is the electronic RFQ tool where government users can post their RFQ and actually make the award. They physically can send the notice to the unsuccessfuls. They have an account and they have the capability of having all of their records saved in this, as they do in GSA Advantage. eLibrary is the search engine of all search engines. In fact, I encourage small businesses that say, Tommy, how do I get a GSA schedule? How do I get into the program? Go to go to eLibrary, physically look for the nomenclature box there, put in what you want to sell to the government, and then you will go to the appropriate schedule and you'll be able to link to the FedBizOps announcement if you happen to be a vendor. So Advantage was the 15 is you can negotiate that contract type. Think about if you need a cost type contract. You can negotiate terms and conditions. You may have issued in your RFP terms and conditions that you physically can negotiate about. And then you also can, the procedures to establish the competitive range is pretty clear cut in regards to 15. Restrictions in 8.4 is the contract type element. All you're going to get in a task or a delivery order is firm fixed price, time and material, or labor hour type orders. All right, you can't modify the product or services that the contractor has at the contract level to meet your customized need. You take it as it's described, all right? And so there is really a restriction to mixing approaches. Time consuming, 15. Resource intensive, takes a lot of manpower. More prone to protest than an 8.4 buy. And then that's going to bring us to the summary where we did talk about the MAS program. We compared 8.4 to 15. And then we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of both of those methodologies. So we covered a lot of ground today. And if you're one that will download this slideshow when you go back, there are some resources that are available as far as the web is concerned. When it comes to this, there is, I was looking to see if there wasn't one that had to do with the CSDs, but if you do, gsa.gov/CSD, Customer Service Director, physically that's where you can find yours. The next to last one on this page, MAS News. We give 2 webinars a month minimal, and the webinar schedule, and they're free. Vendors and contracting folks can take them. They give CLPs, they're live, and so you physically can check the schedule out on that. And so that's information on the webinars and the courses up on the DAU portal. There's 14 trainings up there. We've already discussed the MAS desk reference, and that brings us to the end of the presentation.